Kingston, the tiny gorilla Chloe had once held in her arms, now cast a dark shadow over her with his huge body. Chloe trembled in fear, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake by returning. Not long ago, she had been filled with anticipation, unaware that this moment would bring her face to face with the very danger her guides had warned her about. At that time, the boat drifted down the river. Chloe and her father, Andrew Hayes, had been eager to return to the place they once called home, unaware that the animals they had cared for so deeply could become something entirely different. As the shoreline came into view, they spotted the gorillas in the distance. The urge to approach them was overwhelming, but they had been cautioned to keep their distance. These creatures had spent years adapting to life in the wild, and no one could predict how they might react. Despite the warnings, Chloe couldn't shake the hope that the gorillas, especially Kingston, might remember her. "We have to be cautious," one of the guides said, his voice laced with concern as he glanced Chloe's excitement. "We can't forget how unpredictable wild animals can be, even if they once knew us." Now, Andrew placed a reassuring hand on Chloe's shoulder. "They're right, sweetheart." To her, they were still family, but were they? These gorillas had built lives of their own, forming new families untouched by human captivity. Approaching them now posed significant risks. That's what everyone said. Everyone but Chloe. As the boat drifted down the river, they saw movement in the bushes, gorilla heads peering out, watching them closely. Chloe's heart raced. Even though he had grown and changed, she recognized Kingston instantly. The boat slowed to a halt. Ignoring the calls from her father and the guides, Chloe made her way to shore. Kingston also saw her. It immediately reacted, rising onto his hind legs. He strode straight toward her. The tension was palpable. No one dared intervene. The massive gorilla closed the gap and grabbed her arm. Choli looked fearfully at the animal that he had known since he was a child and trembled. Andrew stepped forward instinctively, but hesitated. He knew any sudden move could escalate the situation. "Chloe," he whispered urgently, "stay calm." For a moment, it seemed their reunion might end in disaster. She searched Kingston's eyes, desperately hoping to find a trace of the gentle friend she once knew. And then, as if a veil lifted, she saw it. Recognition. The tension broke as Kingston placed his head gently against hers, just as he had when he was a baby. Chloe let out a shaky laugh, her hand trembling as she ran it over his head. "I missed you, buddy," she whispered. Kingston made a low rumbling sound, his massive hands still gripping her arm gently. Chloe said softly, her voice steadier now, "I'm here. I'm still your family." Kingston pressed his head harder against hers, and for a moment it felt like no time had passed at all. Their extraordinary bond had its roots in Andrew's lifelong mission to protect animals. Years ago, he founded the Hayes Foundation and managed Oakwood Zoo, a sanctuary for animals that couldn't return to the wild. Chloe and her siblings grew up immersed in this magical world. When Dakota, another young gorilla, arrived at the zoo as an orphan, Chloe, then just a toddler, spent hours playing with him, ensuring he never felt alone. By the time Chloe was older, Andrew surprised her with Kingston, a baby gorilla whose mother had been killed. Too young to survive on his own, Kingston required constant care, and Chloe eagerly took on the role of surrogate sibling. She fed him, held him when he was scared, and watched him grow at an astonishing pace. But gorillas, unlike human children, don't stay small for long. Before they knew it, Kingston had outgrown their home. Relocating Kingston to the zoo wasn't easy, but he wouldn't be alone. Dakota, now a full-grown gorilla, awaited Kingston. The staff facilitated a slow introduction, allowing the pair to interact through a gate. Introducing the two required caution. Dakota's size and strength posed a serious risk. To everyone's relief, Dakota displayed surprising gentleness. Within days, they were inseparable friends. Chloe often joined them in the enclosure, her bond with both gorillas deepening. Despite their size and power, they were playful and affectionate, treating Chloe as one of their own. "You're my big brothers," she would tease, laughing as they nudged her gently. These moments were precious, though Chloe knew they couldn't last forever. Kingston and Dakota were thriving, but the time eventually came to prepare them for life in the wild. Watching them leave was one of the hardest moments of Chloe's life. Yet, she understood it was their chance to live as they were meant to, in freedom. Years passed, but the memories lingered, and now, standing before Kingston once again, Chloe felt the weight of those years dissolve. Their reunion wasn't just a meeting of human and animal. It was a testament to a bond that had withstood the test of time and distance. The gorillas never seemed to feel envious of one another, and they were always incredibly gentle with Chloe. Yet convincing others of the safety of their bond was a whole different matter. Chloe had grown up walking in and out of the gorilla enclosure without a second thought. Spending time with Kingston and Dakota was as natural to her as playing in her own backyard. So when a photography crew came to Oakwood Zoo to capture their unique connection, Chloe didn't hesitate to show off what felt like second nature. The photo shoot, however, sparked outrage instead of admiration. "They're letting a child play with gorillas without any safety barriers," was the public cry. Letters of concern poured in, and the zoo faced backlash on a scale Chloe could hardly understand. The criticism grew so severe that the authorities issued an ultimatum. If safety protocols weren't immediately implemented, Oakwood Zoo would face closure. Chloe's life changed overnight. No longer could she step into the enclosure to touch or play with her two closest friends. From then on, Kingston and Dakota could only see her through the thick glass that separated them. Though Chloe was old enough to understand this wasn't her father's decision, she struggled with the reality. "Why can't they see I'm safe with them?" she asked Andrew one evening. He sighed, resting a hand on her shoulder. "It's not about what we know, Chloe. It's about what people fear." The gorillas didn't understand either. They longed for her presence and would often sit by the glass, staring longingly as she approached. Every day after school, Chloe would rush to the zoo, sit on the steps, and place her hand against the glass, where Kingston's enormous palm would meet hers on the other side. His soft moans filled the air, a heartbreaking sound that tugged at everyone's hearts. Dakota would sit quietly nearby, watching, his eyes reflecting the same sadness. This painful separation wasn't just about public perception. Kingston and Dakota were nearing a new chapter of their lives. They were strong and mature enough to be released back into the wild. Chloe watched helplessly as her time with them grew even more limited. Trainers worked hard to prepare the gorillas for a life in Luna Park, a sanctuary designed to let them roam free. For weeks, interactions dwindled until one day Chloe wasn't allowed near them at all. Months of rigorous training passed, and the day finally arrived when Kingston and Dakota were ready to leave Oakwood Zoo. Chloe stood beside the loading crates, her heart heavy with emotions she couldn't quite express. "This isn't goodbye forever," Andrew said softly, but Chloe knew better. As she hugged Kingston one last time, his massive hand rested gently on her shoulder, his head leaning into hers like he used to as a baby. "I'll miss you, big guy," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Dakota approached next, wrapping his long arms around her in a tender embrace. As the gorillas were tranquilized for their journey, Chloe stayed nearby, watching every moment. She didn't want to miss a single second of their departure. As the crates were loaded onto the truck, she whispered, "I love you both, always." And just like that, her closest companions were gone. Years went by, and Chloe often wondered how her friends were doing. Andrew made a trip to Luna Park some time later to check on them, returning with news that warmed Chloe's heart. Kingston and Dakota had adapted beautifully to their new home. They had integrated into a wild family group and were thriving in the way they were meant to. "They're living the life we always dreamed for them," Andrew told her. Chloe smiled through her tears. She missed them deeply, but knowing they were happy gave her peace. Over a decade passed, and stories of Kingston and Dakota remained a treasured part of Chloe's life. She thought of them often, imagining them surrounded by lush trees, their family close by. She knew better than to hope for another reunion. The gorillas had become truly wild and avoided human interaction. She was warned against visiting them, told it would only disturb their lives and risk erasing their progress. But life had a way of shifting plans. When Andrew faced a sudden health scare, he became determined to return to Luna Park while he still could. "I need to see that place again, Chloe," he said. Chloe didn't hesitate. "Then I'm going with you," she replied firmly. Though others urged her to reconsider, warning her that Kingston and Dakota wouldn't remember her, Chloe's resolve didn't waver. Deep down, she believed their bond could withstand even the test of time. And so, the father-daughter duo began preparing for the journey of a lifetime. For this special trip, they decided to look for the gorillas as well. The journey to see Kingston and Dakota, along with their family, was no small feat. It wasn't something a person of Andrew's age could put off for long. If he wanted to visit them one last time, the moment was now. That was the plan, but when Chloe heard about it, she couldn't stay away. She had to go. She had raised Kingston, loved him like family, and there was no way she could miss the chance to see how he had turned out. Her excitement was palpable, but it wasn't shared. "You really shouldn't go, Chloe," one of the guides said with a worried look. "It's been nearly 20 years. They're wild now. They won't remember you, and it might be dangerous." Another voice chimed in. "You'll just set yourself up for disappointment. It could ruin your memories of them." But Chloe wasn't listening. "I've made up my mind," she told her dad firmly. "You're not going without me." Andrew, understanding her stubbornness and her connection to the gorillas, relented. "If it brings you peace, Chloe, let's do it. But you need to promise me you'll be careful." Soon, they were on their way. The first leg of the journey was a flight to Luna Park, but the gorillas' habitat was far removed from roads or airports. They had to travel off-road until they reached a base camp where they would stay for a few days. This setup allowed multiple attempts to locate Kingston and Dakota if they didn't find them right away. Hiking through the dense forest wasn't an option. Instead, they boarded a small boat and navigated the winding river. Before setting out, the sanctuary's guides issued strict instructions. One of them, a stern-looking man, addressed the group. "Listen carefully," he began. "You can't approach the gorillas immediately. We'll observe from a distance, and only when we're sure they're calm can you get closer. Under no circumstances are you to touch or interact with them. They may have known you once, but they're wild now. We cannot guarantee their behavior." Chloe nodded but said nothing. She understood their concerns, but her heart told her a different story. On the first day of their search, they floated quietly down the river. Chloe and Andrew scanned the trees, and suddenly faces emerged from the foliage. Dark, curious eyes peeked out, watching the strange visitors with a mix of interest and caution. Chloe gasped as recognition washed over her. "It's them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's Kingston and Dakota." The gorillas had grown larger, more majestic, yet Chloe could see traces of the playful companions she once knew. Tears welled up in her eyes as Kingston stepped closer. His powerful hands reached out, and before anyone could react, he grabbed her arm. The guides froze, their faces pale with fear. Andrew looked ready to intervene, but stopped himself. "Stay calm," Chloe whispered to herself, her knees weak. She locked eyes with Kingston, searching for a glimmer of familiarity. Then, in a gesture that shattered her doubts, he pressed his head gently against hers, just like he had done when they said goodbye all those years ago. Chloe's tears fell freely now, but they were tears of joy. "You remember me," she murmured, running her hand over his head, just as she used to when he was a frightened baby. Kingston's grip softened, and he gently rubbed her arms as if to reassure her. It was his way of saying hello. Then Dakota approached, his steps deliberate but calm. He reached out, one finger brushing softly against Chloe's cheek. The tenderness in his touch was unmistakable. Andrew, emboldened by their response, stepped closer. The gorilla's demeanor changed instantly. They leaped playfully around him, tugging at his arms and rolling on the ground. "They still know us," Andrew said with a laugh, though he remained cautious. The gorillas were energetic with him, but noticeably gentler with Chloe. It was as if they remembered she was someone to be handled with care. Their family group stayed at a distance, watching, but not interfering. Chloe and Andrew marveled at the natural beauty of the habitat where Kingston and Dakota now thrived. Yet the two gorillas spent their time entirely focused on the humans who had once been their family. The guides were astounded. "I've never seen anything like this," one of them muttered. "They're wild, but it's like they've reverted to loving humans. It's clear they miss you." When the time came to leave, the gorillas let out soft, mournful sounds, their reluctance to part palpable. Dakota clung to Chloe, his massive arms wrapping around her in a gentle embrace. She stroked his fur and whispered, "I'll always love you." Then she turned to Kingston, her first and most cherished companion. He leaned into her chest, and she kissed the top of his head. "Goodbye, Kingston," she said softly, tears streaming down her face. "I'll never forget you." As the boat pulled away, the gorillas watched from the shore, their cries echoing in the distance. Chloe knew this might be the last time she saw them, but she was grateful beyond words. These remarkable creatures still cared for her, proving that their bond had endured across years and continents. The scene was absolutely heart-wrenching. Despite the sadness, there was a silver lining. They had shared one more precious day with the gorillas. As Chloe Hayes prepared to say her final goodbye, she couldn't ignore the heavy feeling in her chest. She understood there was no certainty that she would ever see them again. Somehow, it felt like the gorillas sensed her pain. They seemed reluctant to let her go. Dakota, ever so affectionate, clung to her as if he could stop time. He held her close, his touch still gentle, despite his immense strength. But his refusal to release her made it even harder for Chloe to pull away. Tears welled up in her eyes as she carefully pried his arms from around her. Then she turned to Kingston, the first gorilla she had raised. He wasn't just another animal to her, he was family. And no matter how much time had passed, he would always hold a unique and irreplaceable place in her heart. As she approached him, Kingston leaned his head gently against her chest, the way he used to when he was little. Chloe placed a tender kiss on the top of his head, her voice trembling as she whispered softly that she loved him. With that, she stepped onto the boat, her heart breaking as she watched Kingston and Dakota standing on the shore, their eyes following her every move. The gorillas didn't take their eyes off her as the boat started to drift away. Chloe couldn't help but feel a deep gratitude that she hadn't listened to those who had warned her against coming. This journey had been more than worth it. It was something she would treasure for the rest of her life. Through this incredible experience, she found comfort in knowing that the love she had given to Kingston and Dakota over the years hadn't been forgotten. They still cared for her just as much as she did for them. Their bond, forged long ago, had stood the test of time and distance. Chloe knew that Kingston and Dakota were now exactly where they belonged, free in their natural habitat, surrounded by their family in Luna Park. It gave her peace to know they had found their place, and she promised herself she would continue her mission to save more animals in need. This extraordinary connection between Chloe and the gorillas was a testament to the enduring power of friendship, even between two vastly different species. What an unforgettable journey of love, memory, and the enduring bond between Chloe and the gorillas she once called family. Her reunion with Kingston and Dakota after so many years is a powerful reminder that true connections can defy the odds, surviving time, distance, and even the call of the wild. Their recognition of Chloe wasn't just heartwarming, it was proof that love leaves an imprint that even the passage of decades cannot erase. Have you ever experienced a bond like this? Maybe with a pet who seemed to understand you completely, or an encounter with an animal that felt like pure magic. Chloe's story shows us that the connections we form, no matter how unlikely, can transform us. We'd love to hear your stories of extraordinary bonds in the comments below. Let's celebrate these incredible moments together.